Times. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.
And I'm Juan Gonzalez. Welcome to all of our listeners and viewers around the country and around the world. The European financial crisis continues to worsen as fears grow that Italy may become the latest EU nation to need a massive bailout. The EU Commission admitted today that the entire Eurozone could be plunged into a recession in 2012. While Greece, Ireland, and Portugal have already received international bailouts, the debt situation in Italy is considered far more dangerous because it is the 8th largest economy in the world, larger than Greece, Ireland, and Portugal combined. Italy is also a member of the Group of 8 and one of the original founding states of the European Union. Now the debt crisis in Italy is threatening the future of the Eurozone and the euro currency. On Wednesday, Italy's borrowing costs reached over 7%, a level that could close its access to market funding. When their borrowing costs reached that same level, Ireland, Portugal, and Greece were forced to seek bailouts. Franco Pavoncello is a professor at John Cabot University in Rome.
With the spread at 500 and interest rate at 7%, certainly is getting more serious by the day. There is a combination of economic and political factors that are quite worrisome. The lack of growth, of the GDP, and the growing interest rate that Italy has to pay is certainly a cause of concern, especially if you join it to the fact that this government seems too weak to really push through this kind of maneuver that is necessary. So right now, I think that things are getting worse. We're not there. We're not yet at the at the moment of no return, in my opinion. But I think it's getting serious.
On the political front, Italy remains in a state of upheaval. Italian Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi has pledged to step down after Parliament approved sweeping austerity measures geared to placate markets. It remains unclear who will lead the next Italian government, though former European Commissioner Mario Monti has emerged as a frontrunner. Proposed austerity measures include increasing the retirement age in Italy, weakening labor laws, and expanding privatization of Italy's resources. In June, Italian voters passed a historic referendum against water privatization, but European leaders are now pressing Italian politicians to ignore the referendum and sell off Italy's water resources. Critics of the austerity measures predict unemployment will soar in the coming year. For more on the Italian economic crisis, we're going to Rome. Joining us is Antonio Tricarico, coordinator of the Italian organization Campaign for World Bank Reform and a former economic correspondent at the Italian newspaper Il Manifesto. He was recently at the G20 summit in Cannes. Antonio Tricarico, welcome to Democracy Now! Here in New York. Talk about what's happening in your country, in Italy.
Good morning, everyone. Well, we are at a crucial stage in terms of the political crisis. As you said, Berlusconi is about to step down in the very next days after the change to the budget law will be approved, quite likely on Saturday. There is more and more a consensus among political parties that Mario Monti might be the new prime minister of what should be an interim technical government, what you might call a coalition government for unity and national unity. But it's very, very scary what is going to happen. I mean, basically, all the austerity measures coming from the European Commission, also with the support of the IMF after the decision of the G20 in Cannes, will go through on Saturday, but already there are discussions about additional measures in terms of privatization of public assets and in terms of reform of the labor system in the country. I think this will lead, in a nutshell, Italy into a tragedy. This will lead the whole economy into recession, which might become a real depression, and this will automatically trigger a banking crisis. I think there are serious responsibility, of course, in the country, and the Berlusconi legacy will stay there. But I think it's worth discussing also about the responsibility at the European level, in terms of the European Central Bank, in terms of the European Commission, and in terms of the German government. Applying to Italy the same measures that have been pushed through in Greece would basically even increase the problem in the long run. And I think Italy is too big to fail for the Eurozone. So I think they're really playing with the fire, and the time has come for changing policy to understand how new public policies can basically trigger not just like growth, but redistribution, and in particular we should review the overall role of the European Central Bank. But it seems that, unfortunately, the crisis is giving even again more political space for financial markets for pushing, and even, I would say, appointing who will be the successor of Berlusconi.
Well, many of the critics of what's been going on in Europe are claiming that the others, especially the southern European countries, should have been adopting a long time ago more responsible debt policies such as Germany has. But you've been critical of the EU domination, of Germany's domination of policy in the EU. Could you explain what the criticism that you've had of the Germans and what they've imposed on the rest of the EU?
Well, I mean, I can acknowledge that there's been a lot of mismanagement in countries like Italy, Greece, but again, you know, this is an issue about mismanagement in the public administration, and there should be responsibilities, and those responsible should be brought to justice. But I think it's fair to say that in the 90s, with the German reunification, the German government imposed an adjustment to the German economy for making Germany a global powerhouse in terms of global trade and make Germany competing globally. So that the overall internal market of the EU has become basically a machinery for supporting this global role of Germany. There are today's statement by Angela Merkel, the German chancellor, is exactly against this line. You know, finally the German government admitted in public that a collapse of the euro would be a major blow for the global strategy of Germany. And this attitude of Germany, which of course is triggered by, you know, a big adjustment and a heavy cost in the 90s in Germany in terms of the labor system and so on, but has increased also with the establishment of the euro, the introduction of the euro, has increased regional imbalances. All the competitiveness, the productive assets in Southern Europe have decreased, and basically all the trade and investment surplus of Germany has gone into the Southern Europe by reducing further, producing deindustrialization. So there is an overall question about that the European economic model is not sustainable as long as Germany and the central power in Brussels see that competing globally is the only way out. And I think we got to the point where this has to be reviewed. Now, there is no interest and unfortunately no solidarity in German, not just in the government, I would say in the majority of the German people, in redistribute wealth and thinking about different European governance. And I think that's a real problem. What is at stake today is not just like the euro, it's really the overall EU project. And this is something the American people should be concerned about, because whatever will happen in Europe will have a spillover in the U.S. economy.
I want to play a comment British Prime Minister David Cameron made today about Italy and the Eurozone.
What is happening in Italy is a warning to any country, any government, without a credible plan to deal with excessive debts and excessive deficits, that you need a plan, and you need to stick to that plan if you want to keep interest rates low so your economy can grow. But there is another issue too, the future of the euro. Italy is the third largest country in the euro. Its current state is a clear and present danger to the eurozone, and the moment of truth is fast approaching. If the leaders of the eurozone want to save their currency, then they, together with the institutions of the eurozone, must act now. The longer they delay, the greater the danger.
That's British Prime Minister David Cameron. Less than a month ago, the French President Sarkozy bluntly told Cameron, "You've lost a good opportunity to shut up." He added, "We're sick of you criticizing us and telling us what to do. You say you hate the euro, and now you want to interfere in our meetings." Antonio Trecarico, your response.
Well, I mean, the public debt is an issue, but again, the major problem we have now in Europe is a banking crisis. All the crises originated from a banking crisis in the U.S. and globally, and again, this public debt crisis might turn again into a banking crisis. So the overall issue is that the euro has been constructed in a way that the model of global banks was basically taken over on a lot of productive assets, and this has somehow limited even the integration, the economic integration integration, a balanced economic integration in Europe. Now, Cameron, of course, is supporting a certain stereotype UK view, saying Europe has the resources, the Eurozone, and so they should help each other, including Italy, as long as they reduce the overall problem. But the question is that Italy is really too big. It's too big to fail, and it's too big to be bailed out properly. So that the overall question is also that while we need some emergency support in terms of solidarity that we don't see at the moment, actually, the real question is how to basically rebalance the overall situation in Europe. I think there is no interest in doing that because the same type of model of policies which have produced this failure are being pushed through by Germany, France, and the European Commission. So beyond the usual hostility between some of the European countries, I think there is a complete lack of vision about how to get out from the crisis in a different way. There is the question about restarting the economy, relocalizing some sectors of the economy, rethinking distributional labor both regionally and globally, and this is not tackled. So as long as these fundamental structural causes of the crisis are not addressed through expansionary policies, through also new public policy, I think it's very difficult we get out from this mess.
I'd like to ask you about the response here in the United States to the crisis. At last night's Republican presidential debate, virtually all the candidates were asked about the crisis in Europe, and they basically responded, well, the Europeans have to handle that themselves. We don't support any bailouts. And they seem to try to separate the United States from what was going on in Europe. But isn't the reality that many financial institutions here in the United States, I think the estimate is that $500 billion in credit default swaps, or basically guarantees, insurance on loans and debt in the Eurozone, could drag down many U.S. financial institutions as well?
Oh, this is absolutely true. Again, the contagion will happen through the banking system. And the U.S. banks are closely linked with the major European banks, and the major European banks are heavily exposed to the public debt here. So whatever will happen, we will face a situation where we will have a lot of European banks again under stress, with a lot of problem in terms of assets, in terms of toxic assets, which in any case might be transferred in the global markets. And again, the U.S. banks, they lend each other. So I think that there is a serious risk for the U.S. economy. The question about whether the U.S. should intervene, well, this is very tricky because this goes around, the new geopolitics, including emerging economies, and the question is whether also emerging economies should intervene and so on. It's true that there are a lot of resources in Europe. One issue is about supporting each other, and maybe through a different way of operating. It's true that within Europe, at large, European Union, not just the Eurozone, these resources might exist. But the other question is also which different policies should be implemented for not going in a worse situation. And I think it's quite legitimate that the people outside of the EU and governments outside the EU have some doubts about pumping money into the European system for bailout or for help when the same policies are producing more failure. So I would like to recall that here the European Central Bank, contrary to the Fed, is not intervening at all in terms of supporting the economy. We can wonder whether the Fed action is successful or not, but in any case there is not even the conception about this public intervention in the economy, and I think this has to be reviewed. So a lot of doubts are legitimate, but for sure they will be impacting whatever will happen in Europe, and this has to be taken into account also in the U.S. policy.
And this push by all the European leaders to privatize, and the referendum that was passed against especially water privatization.
Oh, this is really outrageous. I mean, I don't know any other word other than say this is outrageous. This is a fundamental blow to democracy. Having an institution which is not democratic in terms is not directly elected, like the European Commission, asking a government who had to cancel a law after a public referendum, asking the government what measures will be put in place to bypass the popular decision and the existing new law, blocking water privatization. I think this is something which takes away any credibility and legitimacy to the European Commission for imposing these measures. But this is very telling about, I think, the level of ideology and the major attack, I would say, to real democracy in Europe, which is going on at the moment. You can always argue that in the crisis, that's where many things happen. The same happened in Italy in '93, when a technical government was put in place under stress of financial market. There was a financial crisis, and that's where the first big wave of privatization happened. That's where key banks like Goldman Sachs, Barclays were advising about how to privatize everything. And again, this would be the completion of that project. I think this is really a matter of democracy. If they keep moving this way, I would expect there will be more and more reaction and anti-European sentiment, and it may be very risky as well, anti-German sentiment in the periphery of Europe. Again, I think they're playing with the fire. They underestimate how deep and real are the implications.
Antonio Tricarico, I want to thank you very much for being with us, coordinator of the Italian organization Campaign for World Bank Reform, based in Rome, former economic correspondent at the Italian newspaper Il Manifesto, recently at the G20 summit in Cannes. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. Back in a minute.